Hello, everyone. My name is Montez Thomas. I'm Assistant Director of Admissions for UNC Chapel Hill. I apologize, we've had some technical difficulties tonight, but I will take the next few minutes to share with you some information about supporting first-generation college students who are on college campuses. And there's a number of ways that we want to go about. I'd like to share with you about doing that. But first, before we get into that, I would like to define what a first-generation college student is. In most situations, schools and record-keeping industries keep information as far as first-generation college students are concerned as being someone whose parents have not obtained either a 2-year associate's degree or a 4-year bachelor's degree. And so any student, therefore, whose parent does not have one of those degrees is generally considered a first-generation college student. In many cases, that could mean that they are the first child in their family to attend college, or it could mean that there has been an older sibling who has attended college, but they have not. So it like I said, generally means that their parent has not obtained an associate's or a bachelor's degree. One reason why it's important to make this distinction is because there are several factors that come into play when students have or have not, do or do not have parents who've obtained either a 2-year associate's or 4-year bachelor's degree. One of those numbers that I'd like to share with you this evening, so 82% of students who have college parents who were college graduates generally enroll in college the first year after they graduate high school. That percentage for students whose parents do not have an associate's or bachelor's degree goes considerably down to 54%. And so with that said, there are a lot fewer students on college campuses whose parents have associate's degree or bachelor's degrees. And so those students often come into college without the same level of college knowledge, if you will, that other students who are not first-generation college students have. I personally experienced this firsthand as I was a first-generation college student, and I know some of the trials and difficulties that can come with, but it also comes with some advantages, which I'll speak to that in a bit. So some things as far as preparing students for college success. There are some things that can happen at the high school level, even starting as early as 9th grade or even before 9th grade. But there are some things that I'd like to share with you this evening as far as that's concerned, and then we'll work our way into having those supports at the college specifically. So first things first is research has found that when students have a rigorous high school curriculum, that certainly contributes to better outcomes as first-generation college students. So having rigorous math and English, high-level math and English courses certainly contributes positively towards student success, not only for first-generation college students, but for all students. However, studies have found that generally first-generation college students don't have the same level of rigor in their high school schedule as students whose parents who are not first-generation college students. So that's one factor that we as educators, as well as students themselves, can do better to prepare these students for the next level, which is to encourage them to take challenging courses in high school that will better help prepare them for college. Another thing is establishing the idea that college is an attainable aspiration and that it is a reasonable goal for post graduation after high school. And so really instilling the mindset that college is accessible and that it is valuable as a tool both for making money individually and having more opportunities individually, but also impacting families and communities as a whole. Another thing is to increase the access to information for these students as far as it relates to college access, but also financial aid barriers. And so the more information a student can have about the college process or about financial aid, the better off and the higher the chance that that student will in fact access college and be successful once they are there. Certainly, it does not mean that first-generation college students across the board have fewer resources, but finances can often be a challenge for first-generation college students. On average, a child who is from a first-generation family generally do not have the same level of resources as families who the parents have obtained a college degree. And so keeping that in mind and knowing that financial aid could be a big part of the decision process as well as success rate at the next level is an important thing to consider. I say that it's not always the case because you could look at someone like Bill Gates, for example, who actually dropped out of college but found his way in other ways and obviously is a very successful businessman. And so it's not always the case that the family has lower income, but it can often be the case. Lastly, a thing that will certainly help to prepare students at the high school level are college access programs and exposure to college environments. Programs such as TRIO programs like Upward Bound, Talent Search, McNair Scholars, as well as things like the Gear Up program, which is a national grant that's in many states, including North Carolina. And so these programs help expose students to college life. They help guide them through the process, provide mentorship, as my colleague Janelle was saying previously, and overall just really help prepare students better for being in a college environment and having that previous exposure to be able to be more successful once they arrive. So those are some things that certainly help at the high school and at times even the middle school levels, is for students to have exposure to these programs, for students to have knowledge about the college application process and to know what that entails, for students to have exposure and knowledge about financial aid and how to go about seeking scholarships, grants, and other funding, for students to be aware that that having those college aspirations early is important, and also certainly last but not least is taking a rigorous curriculum while in high school to better prepare a student for for the level of rigor they'll experience once they're in college. Certainly, if you have any questions as we go through this process, as we talk about first-generation college students, by all means, you can submit your question via the window that is in front of you. I believe there should be a box below the screen where you see me, where you can submit your questions if you have any tonight while we go through this. So I've talked about some things that generally help students while they're in high school to better prepare for college and to better support those first-generation students in preparation before getting to a college campus. And the next thing that I like to talk about is once a student gets to the college campus, what are some ways that they can be supported to be more successful and to have great outcomes while there. One thing is to keep the natural mentoring relationships that they have established while in high school. As my colleague Janelle said, one of the strategies for these students is to link up with either a counselor or a teacher, or it could be another classmate or a classmate's parent, a coach or whomever, someone else who has had that experience and the exposure to the college environment, that knows about that process and what it looks like, to really help be a support and advocate as you're going through and you're working through the application process, the financial aid paperwork, and things of that nature. Personally, I had a wonderful high school counselor that helped walk me through all those steps and was really there all the way. But I had to make sure I advocated for myself and make sure I went to see her on a regular basis to ask about those things, because oftentimes high school counselors have upwards to 400 or 500 students on their caseload. And so a student really has to make it clear and evident that they need that assistance and be willing to seek that out. As I said before, it may not be a high school counselor. It could be a teacher, it could be a coach, it could be a friend's parent. There are many resources that students can tap into to make that happen. But once the student gets onto the college campus, it's vital and it's important to continue those relationships because you will be experiencing or that student rather, will be experiencing things that that other people in their family haven't experienced. And sometimes reaching out to their parents may not produce the same level of understanding because they haven't experienced that for themselves. And so having that mentor to rely on and to go back to can be a very beneficial thing. Just a personal aside for myself, I went to UNC Chapel Hill as an undergraduate, and after my first semester, it was very challenging. I was far away from home, and I was a little homesick and actually wanted to leave school and return home. And I called one of my mentors one day in tears, and he really helped calm my nerves and let me understand that my apprehension and my self-doubt, if you will, was not uncommon, that lots of students go through it, but he really challenged me to stick it out for another semester and see how things went. And I'm very thankful to say that I stuck it out and graduated in 4 years and then went on to obtain a master's degree. But again, it's those type of relationships that can really help support a first generation college student as they're going through, again, because they may not have, their parents may not be able to relate in the same way as someone else who has been through that college experience. Another thing that's very important is to make sure that a student connects with the resources that are available on campus. Many colleges will have writing centers, they'll have tutorial services, and other options available for students to be supportive as it relates to academics, also socially and financially through things like work study on campus. And there's lots of resources that could be available, notwithstanding also some clubs that could be available. At UNC Chapel Hill, for example, there is an organization called Carolina First. And the Carolina First program is made up of students and faculty members who are there to support first generation college students. Many of those students are first generation college students themselves. And it is a really great organization that provides lots of resources, mentoring, coaching, as well as advisory services for selecting courses and exploring different programs and whatnot to help with that experience. It also provides a great community where students who are going through the same experience together can all relate to one another and can help support one another through the mission. So there's lots of opportunities for connecting with on-campus resources. And additionally, most schools will require that students will meet with an advisor either on a yearly basis or on a semester basis to help walk through the selection process of classes and things of that nature. And so that's another resource for students to tap into. And so now I'm going to take just a moment to look over some of the questions that you have submitted and try to address those the best I can. So the first question that we have says, is there any mentor program or groups I can sign into before applying? So this is a great question. So I guess the question is asking, so if you know that there is a specific college that you plan to attend, is there a program that you can link into before you actually go through the application process? I will say, full disclosure, I'm most familiar with UNC Chapel Hill. I do not have extensive knowledge of what other schools may offer, and so that question could vary based on which college a student decides to explore and ultimately to attend. In general, there aren't necessarily programs at Carolina that specifically target those first generation, potential first generation students coming in before applying. Actually, I take that back. There are some summer programs which students can be exposed to via their high school counselor. Programs like Heals for Success, as well as Project Uplift, and other programs, summer programs that are primarily geared towards students from underrepresented populations, which can include first-generation college students, as well as underrepresented minority students and low socioeconomic students as well. And so there are some programs at UNC Chapel Hill. Again, I'm not an expert in universities across the board, so I don't know if there are other programs at other universities. However, some of the programs that I did mention before, you may have available in your high school or your community. Programs such as the Upward Bound, Talent Search, McNair Scholars, as well as Gear Up. Those are all programs that are available here in North Carolina, and there may be others specific to your community that you can tap into as well, that provide that mentorship and that group processing to help prepare students for the next level of college. Looking at the next question that we have here. Actually, I apologize. There's not currently another question, but just a suggestion here. If you do have a question, you can click on the checkerboard on the upper right-hand corner of your screen, and then click on Q&A, and that opens the sidebar where you can type in questions. So there should be a checkerboard to your upper right-hand corner on your screen. You can click that and then click the Q&A, and that opens a sidebar where you can actually type in your questions. So I'll hang out here a few more minutes and give you some time to find that link and to submit any questions that you possibly have as we continue our discussion here. As I've alluded to several times here so far this evening, I myself was a first-generation college student. I'm originally a native of Kentucky, and I came to North Carolina to be an undergraduate student at UNC Chapel Hill. And so I definitely relied on my mentors. I relied on the student services that were available. I relied on things like the Writing Center and other tutorial services that were offered on campus, as well as getting linked up with various programs, because research often finds that student engagement, students that are engaged with the college environment, that are active on campus, have a higher rate of success and also a higher rate of graduation eventually. And so those are some ways that I personally was supported while going through that process. And I would strongly encourage any student, whether they're first generation or not, to do similar things as far as making sure you get connected on campus, both from a social aspect as well as academically, to better your chances of success while you're on college campus and going through that process. So again, I'll take a few more minutes here. If you have any questions, on the upper right-hand corner of your screen, there's a checkerboard that you can click on, and then there's a link that says Q&A, and you're welcome to click that, and I will address any other questions that you have. Some frequently asked questions that I pulled up off the Carolina First website. Again, Carolina First is a program at UNC Chapel Hill that looks at supporting first-generation college students. And some questions that were submitted via this website are things like, how can I stay connected with my student and the university? And at UNC Chapel Hill specifically, there are things like the Carolina Parents Association, which provides parents a way to connect with their student and support, as well as connecting with the university. And you can also have access to things like Carolina Magazine, which is a publication via the website. So those are some ways that that UNC specifically supports parents. And again, I'm not an expert on other schools, but I'm sure other schools have similar parent organizations and associations that you can link into as well. We have another question that has come through, and it says, is joining a frat or sorority a good idea for first-generation kids? I would have to say that this definitely would need to be an individual decision. I would hesitate to make a blanket statement as far as that is concerned, you know, regarding joining a fraternity or sorority. For many students, it definitely can be a supportive thing because it's an instant connection to other students, and it provides a great social outlet, lots of knowledge and capital from the standpoint of you have students who either have parents or siblings or you know, other resources that can really help support that first generation college student as they go through that through the process of going through college and whatnot. So certainly it can be a great resource for those students. I won't necessarily say that it's a must, or it can be. There are some drawbacks to joining those organizations as well, from the standpoint, in some cases, it can be a costly venture. And so certainly it can increase the level of cost that a student has while in college. And in some ways, it can provide a bit of distraction if the student doesn't know how to balance being in that fraternity and sorority and maintaining their classwork and other things that they're engaged in. So that really, I think, is best addressed on an individual basis. I would be hard pressed to say that it certainly is or certainly isn't a good idea across the board for first generation college students. But great question there. And certainly you're welcome to submit other questions. We have a few more minutes here that I can hang out with you and address the questions that you may have. I will go back to the frequently asked questions here from Carolina first, because at the moment we don't have any other questions on deck. Another question that was submitted is, how can my student get one-on-one time with professors? And this is something that a lot of first generation college students do not realize, is that most college campuses requires that their professors will give some type of office hour opportunities for the students, meaning that you may have your class with a particular professor on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays at 10 a.m., but that professor makes themselves available, let's say on Tuesday afternoons from 3 p.m. to 7 p.m. And this means that any student who would like to come in and talk specifically about their progress, or ask questions about a particular test, or ask questions about any type of lecture or project or whatever is going on, they're welcome to do so on a walk-in basis. And they generally do not have to make appointments for those, and those professors make themselves available to be supportive. Because it's one thing to get that extra support from a tutoring service, but it's also great to have that type of first-hand interaction and support directly from the professor themselves. So that's also another great way to connect with the professors. Additionally, at UNC Chapel Hill, whenever a student has a big lecture class that is over 150 upwards to 300 students in those courses, they will also provide what is called a recitation session. And the recitation session means that those larger classes break into smaller groups of about 20 or so, and they meet at a separate time away from the regular class period. And a TA or a visiting or assistant professor or someone will work with those students to share some more personalized information that the professor shared in general with the large size lecture, and it kind of breaks it down into a smaller community. And that's one great thing that, as I've talked through this process, really having the ability to make the community right for you and to make it as small and digestible as possible is a great thing. That doesn't mean it has to be at a small university. It could be at a larger place, but really working to establish one's community is a great thing, not only for first generation college students, but for any student who's on a college campus. Another question that is from the Carolina First program that I will highlight for you today. And then we may wrap up if there are no other questions that you have, is a question about how can I be sure that my student is safe on campus? And of course, this is a question that, whether you're a first generation college student or not, that many parents, can be concerned about and probably are concerned about, is knowing that when their child goes off to a college campus that they will be protected and they will be safe. Again, I'm not sure about how every campus works, but at UNC Chapel Hill specifically, there are various measures that we have in place. For one, students as well as parents can sign up for something called Alert Carolina, which is an alert system that sends out emails, it sends out text messages. If there's ever a threat to campus, that being natural, such as an earthquake or a tornado or a strong storm, or it could be something that is not natural, something, a threat that a person has made, or if there's a chemical spill or whatever else may have happened. It alerts those students as well as parents so that they will be aware of what's going on campus. Additionally, there are call boxes located throughout campus, and you'll find this on most college campuses these days, where if a student is out and they are threatened in any way, they can push the panic button and it automatically calls to the local authorities who can then intervene. Additionally, at UNC Chapel Hill, we have things like the point-to-point bus service that can transport students around campus after night. And then we also have programs where some students will literally walk with students from, let's say, walking from the cafeteria or the library to their dorms. If they're out after hours and do not feel safe walking by themselves, it provides, other people and to walk with them and to provide a community feel, because you're always safer in numbers. When you're certainly not by yourself, it's much safer than being out alone, and that's generally the case on most college campuses. So these are some questions that were submitted again through Carolina First website, and also through your questions that were submitted here tonight via the Google Hangout. Thank you very much for your questions. Thank you very much for joining us on the Google Hangout. I think it will be available on the Google Plus site for this organization moving forward. And the Tomorrow Fund provides lots of wonderful information via their website as well as the Google Plus. So certainly take advantage of the resources that are available. And again, just as my colleague did, I would like to give you my contact information in case you have any follow-up questions or concerns and that you'd like to reach out to me about Carolina or college applications in general. It does not have to be related specifically to UNC Chapel Hill, but I can also address any general questions that you may have. My email address is gmthomas@admissions.unc.edu. Again, it's gmthomas@admissions.unc.edu. If you have any follow-up questions, you're more than welcome to contact me, and I'll do my best to get back to you as soon as possible regarding the topic of first-generation college students or any other topics that you may have questions about. So thank you very much for your time and attention tonight. Thank you so much for the Tomorrow Fund for putting this event together, and I look forward to hearing from you all, and as is needed or as you contact in the future. Have a wonderful and awesome night. Bye-bye.